I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it? Yes, I think it'll be really fun to talk about some of the major issues that came up during the debate and dive into how both candidates were responding or not responding to them. And I don't have details about exactly what the response, but kind of just the overall what observation that we saw in their communicating and whatever memory. So one of the topics that came up for me was like this kind of culture war that was happening between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. So like one of the repetitive phrases from Kamala was, we're going to turn the page. We're going to turn the page. We're going to turn the page. And so I know that what the Democratic Party is doing is trying to see which one of these things is going to stick, right? So we're not going to go back. We're going to turn the page. All of them is, hitting our neural tube saying, okay, this is the direction that the campaign is going. Whereas Donald spent most of his time saying, you messed that up. You messed that up too. You messed that up in his way of thinking that it was some type of action or legislation was a mess up. And so yeah, we could start with abortion because that is one of the first topics that I caught as I was able to log on. Was there something before abortion though? Because I'm trying to log on from outside of the country.
I
Do you
don't
remember?
I think my brain is going to fail in trying to come up with a linear chronological order of the things we talked about, especially
Yeah.
because we kept resetting to immigration regardless of what the question was. So in my mind, they talked about immigration all night long. But yeah, so we could start with abortion. That's a good one.
hmm Well, I don't remember. Was there a different policy position that Kamala had when they were talking about abortion that he brought up previously?
Not that I heard. I think, to my recollection, the main conversation was he was standing on his platform of we returned it to the states.
Yes.
He kept saying that that the majority of the country had been divided for 50 years over abortion, and that we did what everybody wanted us to do, which was return it to the states. And of course he talked, he offered his lies about that people are killing the babies after they're born, 9-month abortion, just all kinds of stupid stuff. So but that's new, that's not new. He's been saying that all along. For her, what I remember that I wanted to hear her say was she kept saying, on day one, I will sign, I will put something to forward to the Congress and I will sign it immediately to reinstate Roe v. Wade, but she didn't talk about codifying it. So that fell flat for me, because I wanted to hear her talk about codifying it. It's not just about putting it back into place, but actually installing it so that it can't be ripped away again. So that, to me, that was the depth and breadth of what they talked about. I might have missed something. So did you hear something different or?
Um, no, what I did receive, and this is when I started to see Kamala not as the prosecutor and Kamala more as, trying to connect with the American people because there was a much like, see, he's not thinking about you. And then she was able, as a woman identified person with a womb and all of that, to be able to really speak into you are not having any consideration about our body autonomy. And that is bananas.
Mm.
Um, like it's unheard of, it's ridiculous, and it's bananas. To which, again, he was doing the like, yeah, and I don't care, type of thing. And so to see her to really speak into that and be like, we're talking about a woman who is having this problem, or a person who's trying to actually make a baby, and you're completely disconnected from that, and that is a large majority of the population, not only of people who are carrying wombs, but people who are in love and relationship with people who want to be utilizing their wombs in the way that they want to. So that was, to be able to see that as they were having that conversation about abortion. And again, this positionality of you are going to be and do what I say, and that's what it is a really scary reality to watch unfold. And I mean, all of these things are, again, not new, but we're actually being able to see them acted out in a very clear and direct way because we are watching the way that a white male culture in the US exists and the way a Black female identified person in the US exists.
Mhm.
So it's like there's some expectation in what we are observing, and then there's also this like we are tapped into what the reality of the way that we operate is.
Yeah,
Um,
there
so
also
yeah, so that was on question. Mhm.
well, there's also such a disconnect in the, and this might be getting into the minutia of what they talked about, but he kept saying the majority of the country wanted it to go back to the states, and so that's what we did. But they wanted us to do that, and so we did that. Without the understanding of the violence that comes as a result of that, that there are people that don't have enough money to put food on their table, much less pick up and move to another state so that they can get bodily autonomy. And so
Mhm.
he didn't even, it's so interesting to me, the deeper dive on the way this country works and the way the Republican platform typically says, we want smaller government, smaller government, smaller government, push it to the states, which is like, this is one country. Yes, we have 50 states, but it's one country. And so I mean, I understand, but I don't, the dysfunction of that is so high, and it just breeds that level of violence, right? Because the federal government can't protect the people that are in the states because the state has more control over X, Y, and Z than the federal government does. We vote in a national election, and yet every state has a different system. It's also disjointed intentionally, which is, it's not surprising to me that the main argument for the Civil War was states' rights. This is all the same conversation. So yeah, it was so interesting to me that in his brain, I feel like he was saying, I did what you wanted me to do. The country wanted it to go back to the states, and so that's what I did. So less government. That I did.
Mhm.
And she's trying to turn it around and going, yeah, but it's
Mhm.
violent, or it's women that can't access health care and can't make decisions. Women are dying as a result of this decision. And so that doesn't bother you. And he didn't even have an answer for that, because it was like, you
It
know,
doesn't.
I la 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 la, I'm not listening.
Mhm. Yeah. It doesn't bother him because he has not experienced any direct impact. And I don't know if he ever would experience any a direct impact, I imagine he's going to have some grandchildren at some point, and,
Right.
in that moment where there is an impact,
Well, but
he'll
also to the difference in the
maybe,
system, right? So
yeah,
a
he's
white
always
person
going to have access to what he wants.
is always going to have access to abortion. His whatever woman he gets pregnant, he's always going to be able to send her to wherever to get it done. So
Mhm.
it's the class disconnect in that is
Mhm.
too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It was a really strong point, though, that he was able to return it he is being a catalyst to returning power to the states. But then it also speaks to what's happening on a local and a state level, who's in representation there, and how the majority vote of the constituents are passing legislation. Because if you're thinking about a state like Florida, even when there is a mass movement by the citizens of Florida, there's a component of it being overridden by this kind of like pseudo dictatorship. I am going to shift things the way that I want it, depending on who is in leadership. And right now, we're fully kind of red led in Florida and super conservative. And so you're seeing what it it looks like played out on a state level when there is even more barriers and access to getting people out to vote and or fear tactics and all of the things that we know help to allow and set up, this positionality of control.
Right.
So he made a strong point, and yes, being able to return power to the states. And then it is really the onus of the people of the state to make sure that the representation at the state is really speaking to the voice of the people. Because if you have these kind of like pseudo dictatorships set up, then you're going to have really harmful and violent outcomes. But that is, again, what, to your point earlier, that is, again, what they want, because then that allows a state to return to whatever policies are going to allow it to have its super economy and power.
Right.
And we know in the South what that looks like.
Right.
We know in the North what that looks like. Let's
Yeah.
let's not get it twisted.
South. Yeah.
Again, because capitalism is imploding, and they're trying to like figure out what type of hierarchical structure we can revert back to, so that then we can maintain our power and position and continue this economic wealth gap, and then have a mighty violent third war type revolution, which would then leave humanity very more disparaged than we already are.
Right. 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 Yeah. Well, let's what
Another one. Oh, so they got into the thing about college loans. And I was sitting there when he was talking, and he was like, college loans failed. And I was like, not for me. So I was very happy, because one day I did open up my nail net, like, oh God, I have to figure out how to do this situation and this payment. And I've never benefited in the way that I would really like to from my education. And my balance was on zero. So worked for me. I don't know who he was talking about. So
oh,
yeah.
nice. Didn't know
And I
that.
do know my friends as well, had a lovely benefit from that
Fantastic.
legislation. So for
Yeah.
those who qualify, if you do not know what I'm talking about, it is a support system to be able to help you to get rid of your college loans. And you just have to go online and fill out the paperwork and see the information that connects to like your history of work, and see where it aligns. And there might be an opportunity to reduce some of your debt on educational loans.
Yeah, I'll have to remind my partner about that, because I know he's filled out forms a couple of times and hasn't
Oh, check in.
anything come from it. So it's been frustrating for him. Um,
Mm.
and so yeah, I'm trying to remember the student loan section, and I must have had a brain fart or something, because I don't remember them talking about the
Well,
student.
yeah, I mean, here we go. Speaking to direct impact, right? And in that moment, he was like, you failed, you failed, you failed. I was one of the people it did not fail for. So I didn't know what he was talking about. And she was just looking at him like, she didn't give an actual response. And I wanted to be like, why are you not giving a response? Because what part of the failure are we talking about? Because it didn't fail for me. And I do know a number of people who it didn't fail for. So she could have, again, stood a little bit stronger on the policies that she's been a part of. That was an opportunity for her. Border security. Let's talk about your immigration. That's the next thing. Immigration. Those people, them others, other than what? Other than what? That's what we had the whole time. That's my little song.
Yeah, I'm telling you, if the drinking game word was migrant or immigration, yeah. Yeah, it was unbelievable. And I don't really know that there's a vast difference between the two of them around the border. And quite honestly, I don't even know. I know that he had all these grandiose ideas when he was in the role, and I can't even. I need to do my learning around that, because I can't even speak to what got undone when Biden got into office, because I keep, I hear that he's not great in that either, and that a lot of those families that got separated never got reunited. And so to me, that's just an epic fail regardless. But I did remember the moderators kind of holding his feet to the fire about this is what you've said at your rallies and in your commercials, that you're going to be mass deporting something more than 1 million people, and how do you expect to do that, and what does that look like? And he couldn't answer the question that I recall. What did he say?
Couldn't
Well,
answer many.
I have concepts of ideas.
Yes, that was driving me crazy. I'm
Concepts.
like, and then he said, I'm not in the presidency right now, so like I don't have to think about it. Well, if you're about to be thinking about that you want to be in the office, you should be thinking about it. That
I
man was so funny. The
know.
other thing was just like,
He has
I am
concepts.
very good friends. I'm sorry.
He has concepts of
He
ideas.
has concepts of ideas. But we also know that a lot of his ideas he makes come to fruition. So like that is a dangerous place for us to be at with his concepts of ideas.
Right.
And then the other thing that he continued to do throughout, lacing himself throughout this conversation was, I'm such good friends with, the other dictators around the world.
I
But
know.
then he called out that Putin endorsed Kamala.
Yeah.
So I thought that that was a really like, which one is your point, my friend? That these are your people, or and then he went in, yeah, he endorsed her. He's such a good spin artist. I just have to keep on coming back to it the more I think about it, because he's like, yeah, he endorsed you because he knows that he can get away with whatever he's doing. And I was like, brilliant spin, because how do you speak into the fact that your friend, your homie, supposedly has endorsed this other human being into the office, right? Because everyone was talking about how many people have already worked with Donald Trump and have turned their back on him and the way that he does any of his
I
type of
fired,
leadership and policy.
I
So
fired
that was, yeah.
judiciously and
Hmm.
expeditiously, and he was pulling out his adjectives.
Hmm. He has an answer for those things, but doesn't have an answer for the way that he's going to run our country in this moment, because we know that he's developing his concepts. So yeah, on the border, we did see our traditional Kamala talking about, hard nose, wanting legislation and policy to have many more thankful border patrol people. That's the way that she was talking about it. And at the same time, the numbers that they were spewing of migrant people coming into the US. And whenever I hear that conversation, I immediately think about the indigenous people on this land. And I think about the fact that US territory is really created out of migrant populations. So I just like what's happening in Gaza right now, I am so disconnected from this concept of, we have had this experience of wanting to migrate and develop a nation on a whole different land, and we can have this manifest destiny, but that is not available to everyone else.
Yeah.
And it absolutely blows, like, we're seeing colonization in real time in a way that we recognize the harm and we can speak about it, but we are literally watching it very clearly in Gaza and seeing all of the violence that occurred with it. That is the same history of US territory. And then we are also watching policy now to protect all of the people who migrated here and
Mhm.
not allow other people an opportunity, when yes, we are having a really, our economy is unstable and we are in a period of shift, but we also are US territory, so there is enough resource to make the resource work if we weren't having people gouge power
Yeah.
in the way that our oligarchs are gouging power.
Right. 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 I know. It's infuriating to watch something like that and watch that dialogue and think, what you must think we are so stupid. And I guess in a lot of ways we are, as a general electorate, and please forgive me. I'm collectively calling us stupid. I'm not saying anyone specifically, but we have been trained to believe or turn away from the reality that this country was built in the exact same way that we are manifesting Israel right now out of Palestine and out of Jordan and out of Syria and out of, all the different territories that it's trying to control. And yeah, but it's not okay for those ugly, filthy migrants that are coming from other countries because they're bringing drugs and they're rapists and they're all the when it's the white people, it's the white terror tourists that are bringing the drugs in from the other. It's like you look in the mirror and
That
that
brings up the point of talking about crime. And he's like, and the crime in those other countries is going way down, and the
going
crime
down
in our country
there.
is going up. But the crime in our country is going up with which demographic?
Demographic, white guys. Yeah, yeah, white.
So it's like if unless you're doing the deep dive into kind of like this overarching narrative and building, like this is literally the same propaganda that happened with German people when they started to migrate to this country, with Irish people who were considered like solo
Yeah,
migrating to this country. And then we know what happened with the entire Asian population, both from China and Japan back in the day, until they had to redo the grandfather clause for Japanese folks. I'm like, we if if you didn't pay attention in history, and I am one of those people that could not understand why history was important, and I used to write my papers about this is ridiculous, and it really was because I was a Black child and didn't get to see any positive reflections of the contributions of African Americans and or other people in the development of U.S. territory. So I really struggled with history, but now I love it because I am seeing the literal same blueprint continue to try to be um, ignited again today, to be able to, and if it is ignited again today, we literally are going to have rolled ourselves all the way back down the hill.
yeah. It 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 is. And is that roll back down the hill necessary to finally dismantle the systems that so many of the ruling class don't want to see or understand or do anything with because it keeps them in power? I mean, I don't know if I wish I had the answer. If the true dismantling of this country and the systems that we are so familiar with in the US needs to happen in order to rebuild something new and fresh and that actually works for everybody. But it begins with owning and atoning and naming and claiming the how we got here. And
Mhm.
none of us want to, that's not a narrative or a dialogue that people are having. um
I mean, well, because we're seeing, we're not having the dialogue about how we got here because we're seeing how we got here being played out again.
but the
Like,
disconnect is, but that's not what we're
yeah,
wanting. you know
yeah.
it has a right to defend itself. It's like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
uh, it's colonizing and occupying and destroying. Oh, did you hear the spin around the young American activist that was killed in the West Bank? She was shot in the head by the IOF, and the spin about it, it took days for anybody in power to say anything. And then when Biden did say something, he made a reference at a press conference. Somebody asked him about it, and he said, "Oh, well, that was a bullet. She was in the wrong place, the wrong time. It ricocheted and it hit her in the head." And so, yeah, we're looking into that. She was shot in the head by an
Right.
Iowa in the West Bank. This isn't even in Gaza, and she's an American citizen. Was over there,
Mm-hmm.
trying to help the Palestinians, and they took her out for it. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, it the cognitive dissonance.
Casualties of war.
Yeah, the cognitive dissonance is intense, and has been.
It was fascinating to watch Donald Trump skirt, skirt, skirt. skirt, 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 Israel. He didn't make any mention of it and
They want
kept
to talk
on
about
going
race
over to
and
Russia and Ukraine.
that's it.
So there's two components of that is like a dual kind of aha moment.
Uh,
And one of that is that, all right, white male, stay in your place and don't talk about what doesn't have anything to do with you. And he was able to do that part, right? Because he's not identified as a person of Jewish faith, and he's not going to identify with the Palestinian people in any way, shape, or form. But he can talk about what he does know, his folks from Russia and the Ukraine. And that's what he did. And again, another very intentional and masterful play on his part to not even have to address it and go to in a completely other war that he had more control to be in manipulation of, while at the same time pointing out her failure in any of the negotiations that are happening with trying to get some type of ceasefire or get any type of resolution over there. So another strategic move on his part. And to you know, what I did appreciate about Kamala, and this is what I was saying in my communication, is that I did like when she was able to kind of list all of the actions. So that was like a really strong point in the way that she presented yesterday as well. Like kind of we did this, and this. So even if it wasn't a direct answer, she was speaking into like what they've done policy wise within the administration.
around the, I think you're referring to the when they were talking about the pullout of Afghanistan.
Pull out of there was a couple of times, and I don't have direct references, but it was a couple of times where I was like, I really appreciate that she listed how the administration has approached whatever it is.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
they
mean,
talked about, sorry, with healthcare, they talked about it there too.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there was definitely a very obvious. She could speak in complete sentences and paragraphs, and he couldn't. She could list, and you're right. There were a couple of times where she was able to say, "We did this, 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 and this," and that actually was refreshing to hear.
Hmm.
A cohesive thought from beginning to end with emphasis points in between. It really is
And I
amazing.
just want to acknowledge that as we're saying this, that and maybe I should let you affirm this. We're not speaking to the fact that she's a Black woman who could speak well in sentences. We're speaking to the fact that she's
Oh,
speaking well in sentences where there is an opponent that is being the character that we know Donald Trump to be. So let's make that distinction so that y'all don't come at us.
Lord, I went right into that articulation like differently. Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry. Thank you for saying that.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, no, that wasn't what I was talking about. I was just
I
I
know, I know it threw you off, but I was like, people might hear that
no,
a
no,
little
I'm
bit
glad
differently.
you saw that. I was just talking about the fact that he can't, he has very little possession of nouns.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
remember back when he was in office, he would say a whole sentence would be full of adjectives and adverbs. There were no nouns. So yeah, that's what I was speaking to. So thank you for that clarification. Oh my God. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, no. Yeah,
I know you completely lost your train of thought on that one.
it's okay. It probably wasn't that important anyway. But yeah, there was, yeah. Could there have been more? It is telling to me, and for those, I don't know if we're going to get another debate between the two of them, but it is always interesting to me to see what they don't talk about as much as what they do. And
Mm.
I do feel like of course, she got a question directly from the moderators about Israel. And she said her typical lines, I unequivocally support Israel. They have the right to defend themselves. And then she spewed the lies about what happened on October 7th. But then it was done. It was like it was gone. And then he wanted to say that she hated Israel and that she, and it's interesting. He did not use the word Palestinian. I don't believe so. But remember back in his debate with Joe, he used Palestinian as a slur. So he learned his lesson that time. I'm not saying it this time. They probably hammered that into him during his prep. So yeah. Ultimately, do you feel like you were aided in any way by watching it?
aided. No, that would not be how I would attribute or observe the experience. I would say that it's very clear how we are cultured into our election process. It's very clear that we have two very visible um, uh, parties that are on the platform stage with very similar policies. So now we're literally, yeah, in bed with each other. We're literally going to watch how they use narrative to motivate people to act at the polls. And I do still because of the chatter that I'm hearing about Kamala and the things that are being chatted about, I still am going to stand by the U.S. is not ready to elect a Black woman president.
Mm.
Period.
Well, we'll see. We will see. And this has been a great conversation, and I really appreciate all of your insights, and more will be revealed for sure.
Why do I give a fuck? Why
Thanks
do
for
I
joining
give a
us.
fuck?
Until next time,
Why
as you
do I
move
try
throughout
so
your day,
hard?
continue
Why
to ask yourself,
do I give a
Why Do I Give a Fuck
Why do
is
I
produced in
give a
collaboration with Johanna and Diane. Music by Norwegian musician
care so
Water.
much?
See you next time.